Hi, welcome to our vodcast on growth and development. Today we're going to be talking about two big ideas. First off, talking about how did you come into existence. So for that we'll talk about meiosis, fertilization, and how you went from a single cell to a multi-million celled organism that you are today. We're also going to talk about how an individual grows and changes and how that they can have one single type of DNA and that can become all the many cells that they'll come into existence upon. So we want to start off with the fact there are two types of sex cells, and the fancy word for a sex cell is a gamete. So there are two types of gametes. In a female, there are eggs, or ovum, and in males, there are sperm. So these are sex cells, they're gametes. They're also special because they're known as being 1N, or haploid. So you need two of these cells to create a new organism. So the egg being 1N, and the sperm being 1N, will create an individual called a zygote. The zygote is 2N, something called diploid, which means that they're an organism. So that occurs through an event called fertilization. And fertilization basically made you who you were. For more details on where you get a sperm and egg, that's covered in a process called meiosis, which makes, you can think of it as making little me's. And that's how you go about making beginner cells. For more information on that, feel free to refer to your textbook. You might have covered it in sexual education. So now a little bit about meiosis. Meiosis is the process that makes sex cells. In class, we'll talk a little bit about how that happens. We'll talk about important regulatory hormones. That help regulate and allow for fertilization and meiosis to happen. Some of those hormones include FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, which helps with the growth. LH, which is luteinizing hormone, which helps with things like ovulation. So both these hormones play a part in a feedback loop or regulatory pathway to help the body develop and make sex cells. So ta-da, we've made a zygote. What happens next? So you start from being a single-celled zygote, so we go from one cell. And from there, you undergo something called cleavage events. And these allow you to become a whole bunch of cells, really rapid division. And the first step in that is called a morula, or a ball of cells. Morula stood for berry. So from there you become something called a blastula. And what's special about a blastula is it has a gap. You're starting to create your germ layers. So development has to do with creating germ layers. So what are the three germ layers? We've got three germ layers that help eventually become who you are. You have the endoderm, endo meaning inside. 2, your mesoderm. You think of that M for middle, for mesoderm. And 3, lastly, your ectoderm. So what do these things become? Your endoderm is going to be part of your mouth and your intestinal tract. So basically everything inside you. Your mesoderm is going to be your muscles and your nervous system. And your ectoderm is going to be stuff on the outside of your body, such as your skin. So that comes from being a blastula. So there's a step called gastrulation that makes this. So this is developed by gastrulation. Alright, so now we've effectively created you. You implant and you start growing. You create something called the placenta, which is the connection between you and your mom. and you continue to grow. So what are some other factors that affect development and fetal growth? So now we're going to cover some factors that affect fetal growth and development. So factors that affect growth and development. So some of the factors that affect fetal specifically tend to be the health of the mother. So when you're thinking of health of the mother, this tends to be stuff like drugs, disease, whether or not the mother has access to health care has a huge difference on how the child's going to develop. So health of the mother is big. We also clue in on things such as an environment, which includes things like food, stress, a lot of things that you can prevent and help. But there's also factors that affect the offspring or the child, such as genetic factors. So when we get to genetics in the spring, we'll talk more about this, but realize that a lot of the things that affect people are genetic. You may have a genetic disposition, and these are things like allergies, diseases, things that might run in your family, things like that could be mental, such as depression, are all factors that affect your fetal or life development. So what happens after you started your life? You start your mitosis and life cycle. So what process helps you throughout your life cycle? It is a process called mitosis. So what does mitosis do? It makes new cells for growth and repair. So that means they're 2N, they're copies, one copy from your mom, one copy from your dad. And during your life cycle, you may get cut, and mitosis is the thing that comes into play to fix that. So now I wanted to kind of wrap up on 2 points, the life cycle and different roles of DNA throughout your life. So in the beginning of your life cycle, we covered on how the idea that you went from a zygote to a morula to a blastula to an embryo to an infant. And from there, once you're born in the world, you're an infant, you go through your basic life stages, being a toddler, going through elementary school, going through puberty, becoming an adolescent, becoming an adult. And that's the regular part of the life cycle. We change over time. We change. We grow and develop. So on the very first day of class, I told you that you grow and develop. You're not the same person. That theme is echoed here. We grow and develop. We change over time. And part of that change over time is due to our DNA. So you may recall from previous class, DNA is the instructions for life. For life. And the cool thing about it is your DNA is unique. Nobody else has DNA just like yours. It's one of the characteristics of life. Related to that, though, is that your DNA provides the instructions for all the cells. So it provides the ideas for all possible cells. But you have so many different cells. Your eye cells are not the same as your skin cells, which are not the same as any other cells in your body. Your cells are all different. So how does that work? Since DNA has all the directions for all the possible cells, you basically read only part of the book at a time. So this means, an analogy would be, you have a book, and that book has every single possible instruction, but we're only going to read the chapter on how to become a nose cell. And in that nose cell, it tells you how to smell, how to look, and how to be. And that's exactly the same way it works for all your other cells. So to wrap up, I kind of just wanted to summarize where we've been and to give you a chance to think about what you've learned. So in our summary, I wanted to make sure we talked about what is the difference between mitosis and meiosis. Is there a difference, and if so, what is it? I also wanted to talk about how you went from being a single cell to many cells. How does that happen? I also wanted to hit on what affects your growth. What factors determine whether you grow up to be big and strong or have stunted growth? What factors determine if you're going to have disease or not? And lastly, the last takeaway that you should have gotten from today's lecture is how is it that you can have the same DNA but so many different cells? So these are all important questions to think about, and I hope that by the end of today you can think about it. If not, feel free to come talk to me at office hours, and office hours before school, after school, or shoot me a message on School Loop. It's been great. It's been wonderful. I look forward to seeing you in class, and I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. Have a great day. Take care.